Thank you for tuning in to Beyond Sunday Podcast, Episode 5. Today, we sit down with First Coast Women's Services as we discuss the pro-life movement. We hope you're encouraged by today's episode and you take something awesome away from it. You can watch this on YouTube, Facebook, and you can also listen along on any major streaming platforms. Thank you for tuning in today, and we hope you are blessed.
Welcome to Beyond Sunday. I can't believe this is episode 5 of the podcast, and I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been listening in, leaving some reviews, and just getting in contact and letting us know how the podcast has been blessing you. So I'd encourage you just to keep sharing out and letting people know about what's happening. Now today is such an honor to have First Coast Women's Centre represented with us today. They have fought through traffic to be here today, and it's excellent to have them. So I'm going to, as a way of introduction, just allow each one of you guys just to introduce yourselves, maybe share how you got involved in First Coast Women's Centre and what your role and title is there at the centre. So I'll start with you, Judy.
Thank you. Judy Weber. And I'm the CEO of First Coast Women's Services, and I'm so glad to be here today. It was worth fighting through the traffic to come and speak with you. And I've been the CEO for 14 years, not since the beginning of the ministry, but for the last 14 years. And the Lord brought me here by just giving me a lot of things to do in my life that all pointed toward what I'm doing now. Allowed me to do some teaching, to be in an abstinence program, to be on the St. Johns County School Board, just a lot of things that I've done that all, in looking back, God used to bring me to this point. And when they needed a new director, the group of men that they got together to ask who they should at least reach out to, I knew every single one of them because I'd been either their pastor's wife, their school board representative, worked with them on other committees. So they all thought of me at the same time. And of course, I didn't ignore that or the fact that after praying about it, I felt like this was where God wanted me to serve. And it is. I'm still working. I'm 73. I'm probably going to work forever because I love what I do. So until the Lord releases me, I'm going to be here.
Oh, good on you. So thanks so much for being with us today, Judy. Jen?
My name is Jennifer Pace. I'm the Northside Center Director. My husband is on staff here.
Yes, he is.
So, but as far as being called to First Coast, I do think it's a calling. I believe that God calls us to different things, and so working with pregnancy centers has always been something that is such on my heart. I could have been a teen mom. God saved me and I wasn't, but I've always been just drawn to that kind of work. So I worked for an abstinence organization for like 6 years, and I could say, like Judy, it was something where I could just see God every little part of my life, God just directing me here. I worked at a pregnancy center in St. Gerard campus in St. Augustine, and just fell in love with those girls. And I started to volunteer at First Coast, and love every second of it,
Wow.
So it's a great opportunity to speak into women's lives that may never walk into a church. So it's amazing.
Wow. Thank you, Jen. And yes, and a huge ambassador here at the Springs Church as well for First Coast Women's Centers. And of course, Pastor Matt is one of the legends. So thanks so much. I think everybody knows you here. So that's good. And Mark.
Yes, I'm Mark Eichinger, and I first met Judy about 5 years ago. I teach an adult Sunday school class at my church, and we had a Christmas fellowship, and we brought in Judy as a guest speaker to talk about First Coast Women's Services. And I knew that night that I wanted to be involved at some point. And after retiring in October of 2019, I immediately thought of First Coast Women's Services, and Judy had actually come back to our church again in January of, I think, 2020. And I met with her and went to training in February, and now I'm a volunteer at the Northside Center. I work under Jen, and I'm the men's ministry coordinator there. And I just love the opportunity that God has given me to work with young men and just pour into their lives and mentor them on fatherhood and relationships, and just having that conversation with them about what it is to be a good dad. And it's just been a great opportunity. I've been serving there for about a year now, and it's just the joy of my life now to serve there. So, as a volunteer.
No, I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much. And I guess for a lot of people who are tuning in and listening into this podcast, they may not be too sure what First Coast Women's Center actually is. So Judy, what is First Coast Women's Center, and what do you guys provide? What do you do?
We are a pregnancy resource center ministry, something that used to be called crisis pregnancy centers, but now it's called pregnancy resource centers. And we exist to help women who are caught in that troubling time of an unplanned pregnancy. And we want them to choose life, but we know that we need to reach out to them with the love that Jesus Christ gives us and love them in the situation they are in and present them with honestly with all of their options, information about their three choices, which are abortion, adoption, and parenting, and in a loving way, give them time to take a breath and relax and realize there is support for you in your decision. You're not all alone. So we provide everything free. We're a nonprofit organization. Everything we do is free. We provide free pregnancy tests, free limited ultrasound, and then when they're in the process of trying to make the decision, we do a lot of follow-up with them. Our wonderful volunteers, like Mark is with the men, but we have a lot of women too. Just love on the women and bring them in and share with them all the options that they have. And we have then if they make a choice for life, they may not know whether they're going to make an adoption plan or whether they're going to parent. Then we have a wonderful program of Earn While You Learn, where they can watch with their same mentor, lots and lots of classes, to everything from nursing to financing to everything that might have to do with pregnancy, birth, and even some of the practical things going on in their lives, which for the men, I'm going to let Mark address that. It's a little bit different, but a lot of the same. And we always pray for an opportunity to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. We know that when they come to us, the pregnancy is just the presenting problem. Yes. There's really something else behind it that's brought them to be in this situation. And for many of them, 62% of them, they are already claiming relationship with Christ. So it's a matter of, I knew it was wrong. I know abortion is wrong, but here I am. I'm scared, and I don't think I have any other choice. So it's a lot more mentoring, a lot more discipling than anything else, a chance to help them come back to the Lord through reconciliation, or if they're not a Christian, of course, present that. But we always pray for the opportunity to do that. And because we are completely funded by donations, we don't receive any government funding, we have the privilege of being able to share the gospel whenever the Lord taps on the shoulder and said, okay, here's your in. Yeah. This person is asking the questions that is going to let you lead to that conversation, or to talk about their faith and where they've maybe walked away from their faith or from what they know is true. So we're very excited. We have a lot of other ministries also. Jen, would you like to share a little bit about some of the other ministries that we have?
The abortion healing,
that's
for example,
for sure.
is one.
Yes.
It's a 13-week Bible study that women can go through, and men actually, that if someone's gone through an abortion, they can receive, a lot of women understand. It's one thing you can understand something in your head. It's another thing to really understand it deeply in your heart, that you're forgiven, that you're set free, that you're redeemed. So it's a very intensive Bible study that women can go through to fully walk in the freedom that they have in Christ, and to really understand that they're forgiven. And through that, so many women end up becoming volunteers, and that's the passion that they have, is to be able to share that victory and help to, maybe save someone from having an abortion. Wow. So we have that ministry as well.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, even for you, Mark, being part of this organization, I come from a country where they had a referendum on abortion a few years back ago. And one of the major statements there was, from a women's perspective, it was my body, my choice. So there was never really, it was almost like the men were excluded from being allowed to have a part in the conversation. So when you're coming in, you're doing mentorship for the guys and you're doing mentorship for the men that's there, how does that unfold, and how do you see that taking place, and what would you say to the guys that are out there that are maybe not sure about being part of that conversation? Well,
first of all, I would say to them, they need to stand up for their rights and understand that this child is theirs and that they have a say in what happens. And I just try to get into the conversation with them to talk about their feelings and do you want to father this child? Do you want to be part of this? And I haven't really heard a guy say anything about her saying it's her body, her choice. It's more that they want to continue this relationship with this young lady, possibly. And in a lot of cases, I feel like they might be walking on eggshells and they don't want to say the wrong thing to push her away. So I just want to get to the bottom of it and find out from them, what exactly do you want? Do you want to father this child? And if you do, you need to make that clear to the young lady that you want to be there to support. You want to come alongside. Even if marriage isn't in the future, certainly co-parenting is an option, and they need to at least still have a viable relationship. So a lot of it's just working on relationship building and building trust and those kind of things. So it's just important that the guy understands that he does have rights and that he does have a say, and he just needs to be bold and, tell the young lady what he wants to do. And I think in a lot of situations when the guy steps up and says, I want to father this child, it will make a huge influence on her making a decision to choose life. So that's important.
It absolutely does. Most men, their attitude is just as Mark said, I'll just do whatever she wants. They don't want to rock the boat. So they say, whatever you want to do. What they don't realize is what that says to a woman's heart is, I'm on my own. He's bailed out. He's not going to, I'm on, this is all on me. And instead of, if he truly does want to help father this child, if he will step up and say, I will walk through this with you, not promising, maybe not marriage, maybe they're, that's not, but I will walk through this with you. We've learned if either he, or if she's very young, possibly her father, maybe even a brother, some male in her life who's very, very important will stand with her through this pregnancy. She's so much more likely to choose life. One statistic that just amazed me when I first started, we provide free ultrasound. Now it's the first trimester, and so the baby is not very large. The babies we see are about this big, 8 or 9 weeks. They're about that big, but we put them up on the big screen and you can see the baby, and because it's so small, those of you that have had children know that later ultrasounds, that baby's crammed in there, but this baby is so small, it's moving around, sucking its thumb, kicking, doing all kinds, and you can actually see it on the big screen, and he sees it. If the woman, the mother of the baby, if she sees the ultrasound, for nationally, the statistics and ours too, 85% of the time she's going to choose life.
Wow.
But if the father of the baby, we call him the FOB, the father of the baby, if the father of the baby sees the baby, it goes to 98, 99% that he's going to encourage her to choose life, because God has made men to be the protectors of life. Whether they're Christians, whether they understand it, it just kicks in. The sonographer and usually the chaperone in there say, we just see this change come over him. When he sees that baby on the screen, it's like, we have to protect that child. We have to protect that life. So God steps in that moment and does amazing things.
I've got a follow-up question to that one, therefore. So, and any of you guys can answer this. So, shouldn't that be part of the process? Because we've established First Coast Women's Centre is a pro-life organization. We believe in the sanctity of life. We believe that is life from the moment of conception.
Yes.
So, shouldn't that be part of the process all the time, that at least a parent gets the opportunity to see an ultrasound? And does that happen outside of First Coast Women's Centre? A lot of the attention gets put on organizations like Planned Parenthood and things like that, but is that part of the process everywhere, or is that just something unique to First Coast Women's Centre?
It is actually state law in Florida and in many places, although these laws are going to be challenged, that they have an ultrasound and that she sees it. In fact, she has to sign a paper if she chooses not to see it. But from our understanding, the way it's often happens in the abortion clinic is, it's like, honey, you don't really want to see this, do you? And just sign the paper so it'll just upset you or whatever. And also we've heard from others, it's a very grainy, it's not a good ultrasound picture. She doesn't really, they don't put it up on a big screen. She sees this big on a little screen and doesn't really, like, that's nothing. It's easy to dismiss it under those circumstances. But right now that is the law. And certainly any other Pregnancy Resource Center Ministries, they also are, want to show the ultrasound, want to give her pictures to take home. So that's it's just a gift that God has allowed us to discover that technology, to see that life in the womb from about 6 weeks on. And it has made a huge difference.
Amen. Well, because we've got 2 small children of our own, and definitely when you see that ultrasound, there is it's an instant.
Yes.
There's just that connection there instantly. And maybe Jen, you might talk a little bit about, maybe from a biblical perspective, why is this such a point amongst Christians? Why is this something that we value as Christians? The sanctity of life.
Well, I think about Jeremiah 1:5 that says, before you even were conceived in the womb, I knew you. And so, God's the author of life. So, who am I to thwart God's plan? Who am I to stop what God's will is, and Matt and I, when we do marriage counseling a lot, we'll say, marriage is a way that God brings you closer to him, and he helps you to be, it's a good pruning process. In the same way with kids, God uses children in our lives to help us to become more like him, to see him. We learn so much just from being a parent. It's such an honor. And so, in this world, it's like a kid can stop you from reaching your goals and your dreams, right? But as a Christian, as a believer, this is the greatest thing that God could ever give me, is my children, and those things, all the things that I could earn in life pale in comparison to the reward of being a parent. And that takes sacrifice. It takes, and as you become a parent, as you learn the joy of that, what God works in you. And so I think it's important as a Christian, because a lot of the things that Jesus taught are counterculture. Right. To be a parent is to sacrifice. To be in a healthy marriage is to sacrifice. And so those things go against being the most successful in life, but those things don't always matter.
Absolutely. No, it's so wonderful. And I think you do see that so much throughout the scripture, don't you? Like, children are an inheritance from the Lord. Like, it's a gift from the Lord. Isn't there like that scenario where Jesus is in the mother of Mary, and then she comes in, and John the Baptist is in the mom, and they get together, and there's like this interaction almost in the mother leaping within the mother's womb from that perspective. But you're so right, Jen. It's that the mindset of like anything to get away from the sacrifice, anything to get away from the sacrifice. Maybe Mark, would you share that as a little bit on that too? Like, what kind of a mindset do you guys experience, especially from the guys? What's the mindset that you see coming in there? Is there a pressure financially? Is there a pressure lifestyle wise? Is that sometimes the reason that you see people coming in and questioning from the beginning?
Yeah, a lot of times money is an issue. That we're not ready to have a child. I don't have the money. There's just a lot of factors that go into it. As far as pressure, a lot of times these guys are really young and they just don't feel like they're equipped to be a father. And that's where we come in. I raised four children, so I have a lot of life experiences to draw from to talk about raising kids and all the different aspects that go into it, and the challenges, and I like to be very transparent with the young guys I talk to. I share with them personal life experiences about things that I've gone through with my kids, and I just give you one quick example. Is when my third son was being carried, we had a blood test that was run, and the blood test came back saying he was a 1 in 30 chance of having Down syndrome.
Wow.
And they wanted to do an amniocentesis, which we refused, and they said at least do a heart echo, and we know that 50% of Down's children have a heart defect. Well, the heart echo demonstrated that my third son had a heart defect as well, and the doctor was like, well, this child's not going to have quality of life. We recommend an abortion. And my wife and I are Christians, and we said there's no way. And we changed doctors, and eventually our son was born, and he didn't have all those problems. We prayed, and God healed him in the womb. And you just never know what that child is going to turn out to be. And
Absolutely.
This son now is 26 years old, and he's a very healthy young man. And it's just amazing that when you share life experiences with these guys, it really helps them to get a really good focus on what it is to be a father and the things that, and challenge them, you know, to take that step. And God, you know, if God is involved and Christ is the center, you can accomplish anything.
So good.
And God will help come alongside and help you with this. And so that's kind of the mindset that I have when I talk to these guys.
And Judy, you know, it's interesting because you're even touching there on your own personal experience, Mark.
Yes.
But with the science behind it, you know, we hear that phrase a lot: trust the science, and certainly we agree we must respect the science that's there. But when it comes to abortion and pro-life, is the science conclusive on it? Like, where do we stand in society at this moment in time?
Talk to any medical student, young in their early years of medicine. They take a course, etymology, that has to do with biological etymology, and they learn life begins at conception.
Right.
Begins at conception for animals, but it certainly also begins at conception with human beings. So there's no question when life begins. It just is, how valuable is it, and what value do we place on it, and do we place ourselves ahead of it? What Mark talked about, sometimes it's just not convenient. We get statistics every year. We can get statistics from the state of Florida, and they ask for the reasons why women abort. And as late as 2016, 75% of the abortions they gave as the reason personal choice. It was nothing to do with, it didn't say financial, medical, rape or incest. I mean, none of those things. It was personal choice. And I know Mother Teresa was really hard on that when she came to visit this country, saying it's a shame that you would do this just for your own convenience. So some of it is that. It's the basic selfishness, which I think most of our clients, I would say, they just don't realize how selfish they're being. They don't realize it. And so they need time is what they need. They are panicked. I have to do something. I have to do it now, immediately, and they don't stop to think. But if they have somebody to talk to, like Mark or like Jen or like the other people in there, to slow down, also to be listened to, especially for men. I'm going to put a plug in here we need volunteers, but we need more than anything, more men volunteers. And you don't have to be a professional counselor. You just have to be a man with some life experiences, and be willing to listen. Nobody's listening to the guy. You know, they're talking to the woman. They're not listening to him, and he doesn't need somebody just telling him what the Bible says or what he should do. He needs to be listened to and really hear what he's saying, and then talk about, why do you feel that way? What was your past experience? Maybe we find out he had a horrible childhood, or he was in a foster home, or there were things that have caused him to think, no, I can't let this baby be born. So getting a chance to talk about that with someone who listens and isn't trying to make the decisions for him is just been wonderful, and it's just huge. So any men out there who may think I'm not qualified, you are qualified. Even if you haven't had children, you've had a lot of life experiences that would help you be, if you're someone who loves the Lord and is willing and able to share the gospel when God opens that door, please contact us. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah. And at the end of this show, we will provide the information how people can connect with First Coast Women's Centre, and that would be a fantastic thing to do there. And Jen, when you guys have people who come in, do you talk about the ethics of abortions with the individual, or how do you approach that?
So there's 4 things that we always cover. We always cover fetal development because, there was a girl that I had the other day that was a nurse. And so you would think that she would know the fetal development. But when she saw the boxes, it completely shook her to see that her baby was, 7 weeks in this big already. So we always talk about fetal development. We always talk about abortion procedures. If she's thinking about an abortion, then she really needs to see what's going to happen. But the one thing that I love that we do is, and we always have a spiritual conversation, but we have these things called the option boxes, and it really just allows a healthy dialogue back and forth. And so what I always tell my counselors, and I do myself, is I listen, speak. I listen, speak. I listen, speak. If I come to her and I have this pat answer of, okay, these are the things I'm going to say to her, I'm going to make sure that I say this one thing, that I'm missing it. I'm missing her, because every single woman has a different reason why she's considering abortion. Every single woman has a different story, a different background. And one thing that I love, I was reading the story of Hagar, and it says that God showed himself to her as the God who sees, as El Roy. And he saw her in her situation, he saw her in her circumstance, and she responded to God as, you're the God who sees me. And I think that this is what our girls need that come into our center. They need to be seen, they need to be known. We all want that in life. And so they're going through a situation, they're going through a struggle. And so I need to be willing enough to listen to her. And then as God gives me the words, then I speak. But if she can sense that I just have this pat answer and I'm just going to kind of treat her a certain kind of way, then she closes off and she's done with me. And so it's important for her to feel like it's a safe environment that she can really open up to share why she's thinking about it, and then to process through it. And and if she leaves and she's undecided, like, that's okay.
Right.
I of course, like, every single time I want her to change her mind immediately and walk out the door, and we're skipping out the door and she's chosen life, but that doesn't happen every single time. And so to keep that relationship, Judy had talked about the follow-up, to maintain that relationship and keep that door open, so that way she's always having someone wise speaking into her life. There's a girl that I met with about 2 weeks ago. She's still undecided. We're still following up with her. She's 19 and she just doesn't have a stable home environment. So we're trying to get her connected to different ministries where she could maybe have a stable environment, and we're keeping that quality of care up with her, so that way she doesn't feel forced into a decision that she doesn't want. So a lot of girls even will come into our centers and they may say, like, philosophically, I'm against abortion, right? But I feel forced into that position.
Wow.
Yes.
And so it's important to, even if I were just to have a conversation, okay, well, ethically speaking, are you against it? They may say, I think it's wrong, but I'm still going to choose life. Or they may say, I think it's wrong, but I'm still thinking about an abortion. I'm so ashamed.
Wow.
There was a girl who came in and said she marked herself as other, as not a Christian. And after the conversation, she ended up telling me, well, you know what, I am a Christian, but I was just afraid of you shaming me for considering abortion because I am a Christian. And so it's important to be that listening ear and to not be afraid of listening.
Yeah. I think we could do a lot more of that in society in general, couldn't we? Listen, then respond, respond. I think that would be a good move on our part. And maybe for any of you guys can answer this question. But say a family or an individual decides, hey, I'm going to have the abortion, or have had the abortion. Number one on that, is there a knock-on effect on the individual or family afterwards? Is there a lasting effect afterwards? And then, do you guys provide any kind of a service for those who may have had an abortion but then go on to either regret it or feel, shame or something along those lines? How do you guys respond to those kind of situations?
Well, let me answer the second part first, and that is absolutely. And many of the women who come to us seeking an abortion have already had one. No one wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I'm so glad I get to go have an abortion today. We have never met any woman who wants to have an abortion. It's been described as an animal caught in a trap who has to chew off its arm to get out. They think they have no choice. They feel pressured that they have no choice. And the great majority of them do believe it's wrong. When you ask, how do you feel about this? Oh, I know it's wrong, but I have to do it. I don't have a choice. So our job is to try to help them see there are choices. You do have choices, and there's support for those choices. However, we make sure they know if they leave and they go have the abortion, they are welcome to come back. And they do. Many of them not immediately. Some of them call and they call and let us know. I had the abortion and I feel terrible. You want to come back in? And they don't. The average time, statistics have shown that the average time from when they're ready to really begin to deal with it is 5 years afterwards. But some of them it's 35 years. It's when they come to volunteer for us, and then they say, well, I'm here because I'm trying to make up for what I did. So it's 35 years later. They've carried this burden, never told anyone, carried the guilt. There is a tremendous amount of guilt, and there are lots and lots of studies that show that women who have abortions, the suicide rate, the alcoholism rate, all of the things that you would think that they're all greatly, greatly increased. And not just that, the possibility of her having an early birth of her next child, especially if it's a midterm or later term abortion, because of what happens, she has to have her cervix stretched. That we're now the only country with our resources that has such a huge number of preterm births, babies born prematurely. And the reason we do is because we have, not in every case, of course,
Yes.
but a lot of cases it's because that woman has had one or more abortions, and when she tries to carry to term, her cervix will not hold. And so we have a lot, and of course there's all kinds of issues with preterm babies that go along with that. But we do want them to come back, and we encourage them to come back, and whether it's that week, and I'll tell you a story about one of those, that week, the next week, or whatever, we have a very confidential ministry. Our abortion healing assistance ministry is completely confidential. I don't even know who goes through the classes.
Right.
When the classes are over, I get to see some of the stuff, we lock it away. No one really ever needs to know, but almost always, by the time they're finished with the classes, they end with a celebration where they honor those babies. God gives the women the name for the baby that they never saw.
Wow.
They can make a plaque for that child. We have a memorial downtown on the campus of First Baptist Church, downtown Jacksonville,
Wow.
that they've allowed us to build on their campus, where they put plaques on the wall for remembering that child. Sometimes there's a woman and she'll have multiple plaques she's putting up at the same time. And then in Chattanooga, there's a national wall for that is memorial to the abortion. A plaque goes there also.
Wow.
On the ground, there are paved stones to memorialize children lost to miscarriage, early infant loss, anything like that. We have a ministry for that too.
Amazing.
And so they can put that there. But one time, I remember we had a very, very young gal who came in, and she was pregnant, and she was still in high school. She was a cheerleader, and she made the decision, had the abortion, and then the next day she went to cheer at a game, and it was a very early abortion, and so she was young, and she was, but she just dissolved, and then she came in the next day, and she said, it just hit me, it just hit me all of a sudden what I had done. And so hers was an immediate response to what she had done.
Right.
And she, wanted help and hadn't told her parents. We always encourage, we cannot call the parents. We follow the same guidelines that the doctor's office does.
Right.
We want to pick up the phone and call that parent, but we
Yeah.
cannot do that. We might even know the parents. They might be in our Sunday school class at church, but we cannot. But we
Wow.
greatly encourage her to tell her parents. We have all kinds of literature, how to tell your parents, and then we say, bring your parents in and we'll talk separately with them, how to love your pregnant teenager, how to get over that initial, which is mostly the initial is surprise and shock and maybe disappointment, and the dads might get mad. They usually get mad. Then they get over that and they're ready to help for the most part. If not, there are maternity homes in this area where they can go and stay. But in almost every case, after a little while, the parents are ready to come around and support her in choosing life, whether she makes an adoption plan or chooses to parent with the help of the parents. But we another place that is so critical is in the ultrasound room, because if someone's had a previous abortion, they're most likely not going to put it down on the intake sheet. Have you had? No, but when they see that baby, which they did not really see the previous one, is when it really hits them. That was a baby too, and so our sonographers are very, very compassionate and wonderful at how to deal with that when she kind of comes unglued, recognizing this is a baby, but that was a baby also, and in just loving her, and they do a great job. Our staff and our volunteers are all so loving and kind, and whatever their background, whether they themselves had an abortion, or whether they had a teenage pregnancy, or they know someone who did, or something, they understand that we can't push. All we can do is love and allow the Holy Spirit to make a change in her.
That's awesome. No, so good. And maybe, Mark, you've been on staff at of churches, and you've been around the church circle, I think, for quite a while, just from talking to you previously. Does the church do a good job when it comes to this area, and what could the church do better to tackle this conversation?
I think that the church could do a much better job in talking to their youth about abstinence to begin with. I see a lot of young men that come from Christian backgrounds, and they get involved in living with the young lady, and then find that they're in a crisis pregnancy, and they're not really sure where to turn, and a lot of times it's just talking to them and getting them to recognize where they're at, and to try to draw back on their Christian upbringing and try to get back on track.
Right.
So I think the church really needs to do a better job in teaching young people that, the Bible's very clear on sex before marriage and to stay pure and have people in their lives even after they're graduate from high school and move on that are able to be involved in their lives and challenge them, to encourage them to stay on the Christian path if they grow up in the church. I think that's very important.
We're in our new strategic plan. One thing that we're going to do is we are going to initiate a sexual risk avoidance. That's the new terminology. Abstinence, just young people are just, no. Yeah. Sexual risk avoidance. Who wouldn't want sexual risk avoidance?
Right.
And so we're going to start, I'm going to let Jen's involved in this because she and I worked together at Project SOS along with Matt, and let her tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what we're planning to do, hoping to do.
So actually, if I can piggyback on what Judy and Mark said, a lot of times people will think an abortion is just physical, but it's also, it impacts you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially, right? Sex is the same way, right? Our culture will try to say, well, it's just a physical act, right? But that affects you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. And so our culture will try to just put us in a box where, it's just a physical act and we should be able to get over it. But God created us to be much more than a physical being. And so to cultivate that purity is so important. And if we're going to do the things that God has called us to do in our life, we have to be self-disciplined, And so it's a great opportunity for us to be able to speak into the life of young people because, prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that is 100% true. It is 1,000% true. And so we can help to save babies by, ultimately, if we can get the young people to really value themselves. See, if the thing that's funny is if you don't value yourself, then you're not going to be abstinent. And then if I don't value my own self and I go and have sex, then how am I going to value the life that God has given me?
Wow.
And so when we think about the sanctity of human life, it's a much bigger thing than what it looks like on the surface value. Right, I have to understand who God created me to be and honor Him. And as I honor Him, I honor myself, and I realize that I am actually a child of God. I'm His daughter.
Yeah.
You are His son.
Right.
And so why would I let someone just trample on that? I think about the pearls and the pigs. Why would I throw my pearls to pigs? Right, Jesus says.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to be learned there, and so we're going to start by going into some churches and talking about abstinence and purity, and really God's heart behind that isn't about do's and don'ts. It's really not. It's about God's call on your life and really honoring that, and then through that, the ripple effect on generations is huge. I mean, I love First Coast because I can just see how it can impact generations.
Wow.
Yeah,
and that'd be maybe an awesome point to touch on, and you guys can follow up even on some of that if you want to in this next one. But first of all, it is more complex. Like you said, Jen, sometimes society tries to put it into these boxes, almost like that they don't have any correlations or knock-on effect, but it is more complex. And I can see it as you guys are very passionate on this subject. And you guys are, on the front lines of this ministry. Is it successful? Do you guys see testimonies? Do you guys see turnaround? Do you guys see things, maybe share a little bit about that? Like what are some of the, because you said you see the effect for generations. Well, come on, tell us some of the good stuff that you guys see.
We have stories. Touch me, I'll tell you a million stories, and I'll let them tell some stories too, because we could just stay here all day and tell stories. But one that's very, very recent, and that's, I think, is the way we're heading now. There are several types of abortion, but one is the abortion pill, RU486, and it's a several step pills, and so they get it from the abortion clinic. So we had a young woman call, actually not a young woman, we had an adult woman married with several children. She called, and she and her husband had decided it just wasn't convenient to have another baby. So she went to an abortion clinic to get these abortion pills, and she described it as being like a mill. She said they just put us into 2 rooms, those having surgical and those having the abortion pill. They just came down the line, handed you the pill, you took the pill, and you walked out. They told him nothing about the consequences, nothing about the side effects, nothing about what she was going to be facing, which was giving birth at home alone, probably in the toilet, to a baby. And the baby is small because it has to be before 10 weeks, but the baby's still about this big, and you can see that it's a baby. They didn't tell her any of that. As she was walking out, the receptionist said, I hope you have some pain pills. And she said, yeah, I've got some ibuprofen. And the receptionist simply said, you're going to need more than that. She said that was the first time it hit her. Wait a minute. This is not just like taking an aspirin or an antibiotic. She went out and sat in her car and got on her phone and said, how do I stop this thing? And there is an organization, a national organization called Abortion Pill Reversal. She reached them in 5 minutes. A doctor called her back, and someone called her back, and in 30 minutes a doctor called her and had prescribed pills to stop it. And it was early enough, so then she found us, and this is a little different than our usual stories. So she called us, and she wanted to come in to have a sonogram to see if that baby was still alive and what was happening with that baby. And so she came into our center last week and saw a very healthy, they said the baby was dancing. It was just a very healthy young baby. And she was so thrilled and just felt like, gosh, God protected me from an irreversible mistake. It was just that close. And that's what the new things that we're up against, because women are going quickly to get the abortion pill. Before, often, 6 weeks, 75% of the abortions in Florida last year were done at 6 weeks or less. So that means we wouldn't have been able to show them an ultrasound in the most time. So we're reinventing ourselves. That's a whole other story on how we might be able to reach these women and get them to come in. But that was a little bit unusual. But we have many, many, many other stories. Anybody want to tell another one? Because I could tell them all day. But that's a unique one. That's kind of different.
Incredible.
I'm thinking about one right now. At the front of our center, there's a butterfly. And so what's funny is I've always prayed, okay, God, I want to see the transformation. I want to see a total transformation in someone's life. Like, help me to see that. Yeah. And so there was a girl who actually, she didn't show up for her first appointment, and so we follow up with them and try to see, if I'll try to call them, leave a message. If I can't do that, they're always will text me back. I mean, not always, but, they'll text me back. So I started texting the girl back and forth through the company text thing. And so she starts asking me all kinds of questions. She's like, well, how long will I bleed? She's just asking me everything. You can tell she's scared. Right. And so I finally get her to commit to come in for an appointment just to talk about things. And so she gives me all the reasons why, she ultimately having the baby would make her stay in a long-term relationship with this guy that she'd rather not be in a relationship with. And so anyways, she's crying just about the whole time. She ends up doing a sonogram. She's still very somber, just really, really pressed. You could see that God was really working on her. And so she left, undecided, but she still made an Earn While You Learn appointment. And so we're following up with her. She says that she's going to keep the baby, but I'm not certain because, you never know. And so she shows up for her Earn While You Learn appointment, and she comes to her Earn While You Learn appointment. She's got a butterfly shirt on. Wow. And it just spoke to me. And then as she's talking to me in the Earn While You Learn, she's chosen life. Through our conversations, she's talking to me. She starts bringing up her questions about God and how she doesn't understand God, and her heart is not. So she's keeping this baby, and her heart is wide open to God now, and she's the one bringing up God in the conversation. And so God is using this opportunity, this pregnancy that was an unwanted pregnancy, was something that she had not planned in her life, as an opportunity to draw her closer to Jesus. Wow! And so God is using this baby in her life in tremendous ways. Amazing. And so I love it because it provides an opportunity to really get to know people on a very deep level, and it's an honor. Wow. And so yeah, I can't wait to see the end to her story. I'm so excited.
Man, people need to hear these stories.
I have 2 that I want to share recently, and they're really on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes, sir.
Recently, a young man and his girlfriend came in. They had 2 children already between them. And she was very abortion-minded, and he was kind of 50-50 on the fence. And they both recently quit their jobs in order to start their own business. And now here she's pregnant, and they're like, this just is not a convenient time. I talked to him about faith and his faith background, and he knew abortion was wrong based on his upbringing and faith. And it was really just for convenience. And so sometimes you just really have to have some discernment and go by the Holy Spirit's prompting on what to say. And so I asked him, have you had any experience with abortion in your life? And he had told me his sister had had 2 abortions and that she was still devastated over both of her abortions, and she just carried the load with her. And I said, well, it's going to be the same for you and your girlfriend if you go through with this. And then I don't know where this question came from, and I shared it with Jen afterwards, and she said, that was kind of bold that you asked that. You remember this, right? And I said to him, let's fast forward 10 years down the road, and you have these 2 children already. What's going to happen in the future if your 2 children find out that you aborted their sibling? And he didn't have an answer. He was like, oh, I never thought about that. And during this conversation, she's with the female advocate, and they're texting back and forth.
Yeah.
The girlfriend and the boyfriend. And they're texting back and forth, and they left choosing life.
Wow.
And he felt like that one question was the catalyst for changing his mind, is what would his siblings think about and how it would damage the relationship. So that was one end of the spectrum. Recently, I had another young man come in that I'm always very transparent on the front end about where I stand as far as being a Christian, and I like to speak from a biblical worldview, and I will probably talk about God and share scripture, and if you're uncomfortable with that, you need to tell me up front so that we can, I don't want to, push you in the wrong direction. And they're usually very comfortable with me talking from that mindset. And this young man told me that he felt like there was a higher power out there. He didn't want to mention, he didn't want to acknowledge that there was a God. And so after the third visit, I realized that there were some relational issues going on between him and his girlfriend, and we decided to do this video series called The Crazy Cycle.
The Crazy Cycle, yes.
And it's based on Ephesians chapter 5, the husband and wife relationship, so he watched this video, and it just opened up a ton of questions. And after the conclusion of the video and through discussion, he basically said 2 things. He said, I feel like I'm missing something huge in my life, and I have this huge void, and I don't know what it is. And that just opened up the gospel conversation. Mm-hmm. And he prayed to receive Christ in the room, and he's coming back soon. Very soon, and I have a new Bible that I'm giving him. And that was another thing. I had given him a Bible, but it was the King James. And I asked him if he started reading the Gospel of John, and he said, I tried, but I didn't understand it. So now I have a different translation that I'm going to give him, so to start discipling him in his new walk. So it's amazing, just the opportunity that God has given us as volunteers to be involved in this ministry and see lives changed.
Absolutely amazing. And this may be a good opportunity because if you're a Christian out there, this is what we live for. We live to see lives transformed. We believe in a God who redeems, who restores, who, it turns it, completely around. How do people get involved, and how do people volunteer? Like, what would be the process? Do they need to have a degree? Do they need to have, what do they need to do to be a volunteer?
They just have to know and love the Lord and love people. Yeah. And the best way is to go to our website, which is friendsoffirstcoast.com. Org. Yeah. Yes, friendsoffirstcoast.org, and they can read all about us. We have a lot of other ministries, and they can read about them, and they can. There's an application there, and they can also see where all our centers are located. We now have 5 brick and mortar centers and a mobile unit. So we have one in Clay, one on the north side up by the airport, one out in Baker County, in McClenny, one at the beach, and one in Mandarin. And then we have our mobile unit that goes to underserved areas. And so they can look for where they think they might want to serve. They can fill out an application. We need men in all of our centers, and we need ladies in every center except Mandarin. Mandarin has got more than enough volunteers, but every place else could certainly use volunteers. And so they can fill out an application. And there's other things. We have, of course, the mentors, male and female, the receptionist, who is such a critical first contact person, but we also have people that work with we receive donations of baby clothes, all those things. We have churches that give baby showers for us and supply us with things, diapers and clothes and whatever, and they can work in the room where that is received and gotten ready to put out in the boutiques where the women can shop when they come in, when they're doing the Earn While You Learn program. They can help with development. We have events. We have a lot of events, banquets, fashion show for the women. I mean, other things that they can help with. So there's lots and lots of ways that people can get involved, and we really can use all the help. No special qualifications, no degrees are necessary. Just love of the Lord. And we train. So we would never put somebody in there when they didn't feel ready to talk. We wouldn't stick a man in there like for Mark. Okay, Mark, this is your first day. Here's your guy, to go talk to. Absolutely not. We have a process where they work. They first go through the volunteer training. That's where it has to start. And then they go into a center and work and learn while they're there.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm going to kind of begin to land the plane here in this conversation. Yes. And so I'm going to go to Jen, Mark, and then I'll give the final word to you, Judy, today. Let's just talk about maybe hope for a moment. And, this is a sensitive subject. I think, a lot of families are affected by this. And it's maybe a twofold question, like is there hope moving forward? I know I come from a country where by national referendum, they voted in legislation to bring abortion in. It seems like here in America, there's a battle going on between states. And in some ways, you feel like sometimes the tide is turning a little bit on the conversation. But, is there hope there? Is there hope for change in America? Is there hope for a change that we can bring back a respect for life and the sanctity of life moving forward? And whether that's at a national level or how we can begin to do that personally in our own community, how would we do that to bring back that hope? And maybe Jen, and then we go Mark.
I pray a lot for, we have 4 abortion clinics in Jacksonville, and I'm constantly praying, and our volunteers are constantly praying that those would shut down, that the people would come to know Christ. If everybody gets saved, then there can't be abortion clinics in Jacksonville. But honestly, though, I think about Paul, and I find myself constantly praying this for their clients and for the abortion providers. Paul, his eyes were blinded, right? He was going fervently in one direction. Right? And then God blinded him, knocked him off his horse, and he went fervently the other direction. And that can be true. A girl could leave our center and be abortion minded. And God is a big God who can speak to someone, whether she's sitting right next to me or she's in a different location, right? And so there's always hope because we have a good God, and we have a God who's powerful. And so our God is big enough to save these abortion providers. God is big enough to work in hearts and minds, and our confidence is always in God. And if it's in ourselves, then we have no hope. But if we have a confidence in God, then we have all hope. So amazing. There's lots of it.
Thank you so much, Jen. Appreciate it so much.
I just feel like Christians need to speak up. I really believe that if Christians would be bold and we would vote for legislators that are pro-life, and that's where the change has to take place. It has to take place in the hearts of men, but we need to pray that godly men and women would step up to be involved in the political side in order to make change. There are certain states that have heartbeat bills now. I don't know all of them, but right. Strong conservative leadership in those states have stepped up and said no more, and they've placed further restrictions. And it takes legislative action, unfortunately, for that to happen. But it starts with prayer, and it starts with godly men and women stepping up and taking a stand.
Thanks so much, Mark. Appreciate it.
We don't consider ourselves a political organization. We try to follow the model of Jesus that he could have overthrown the Roman government. He could have ended slavery. He could have done so many things that he didn't do. He dealt with the people one person at a time, meeting their needs. And that is what we do. But we do encourage everyone that we talk with to understand how to support the pro-life position, how to be intelligent in your conversations, not be afraid to bring it up. But the biggest thing I think that can happen is for people to know about us.
Right.
So many, even Christians, so many don't know about us and that this is an option, because everybody's going to have, a friend, a neighbor, a niece, someone who becomes unexpectedly pregnant. What do I tell them? Where do I send them? And for them to send them to us. And so we really want to encourage, all churches, and your church does a great job, but all churches to make us known and stand for life with us, together for life, and make a stand so that people will know and will understand. That's the biggest thing, I think. The tide is changing. It was actually from about 2006, the abortion numbers were going down, and then they sort of flattened out, and then during COVID, they went back up, and we feel like that was because, number one, we were closed for a little while. A lot of people were closed, but also there was more fear. There was fear of the economy. There was fear of COVID, and so people rushed to get abortions. The abortions went up. We're going to be curious to see if they come back down somewhat this year, and we're really, of course, praying and doing everything we can to see that they do come down. There was some fear and some like, oh, woe is me among many Christians when we changed leadership at the national level, knowing that our previous president was the most pro-life president we have ever had. And yet there were some things he couldn't get done. And so now it is true that at the national level, things are definitely more pro-abortion. And yet now, finally, for the first time, there's going to be a case, Mississippi case, that's going to be heard before the Supreme Court that could be the beginning of dismantling Roe versus Wade.
Wow.
I don't know. We don't count on the government. We don't count on any legislation. We know none of that. We know it's God. And God is a God of life. He loves life. So we know He loves what we're doing. He loves these babies. And we're asking Him to help us end abortion, end it in Northeast Florida in my lifetime, and end it so that we'll eventually look back on it like slavery, like we do slavery, saying, how could we ever have done that? How could a loving country ever have done that?
Yes.
And we'll look back on abortion the same way, saying, that's unbelievable that we ever allowed that to happen in our country.
Fantastic, Judy. If somebody's out there and wants to contribute to First Coast Women's Center, what do they do?
They can go to our website, and there is a donate ability right there on the website. They can do that, or they can call up on the phone and ask to talk to someone that they can handle that over the phone if they're not comfortable doing that, or they can mail a check to us, whatever they'd prefer to do.
Wow. Well, I want to take a moment and just thank you guys for being here today. It's been a tremendous conversation, even for myself personally, just to sit, hear the testimonies, hear the resources that's available. It's a blessing to our community, so I want to thank you guys for that. I do want to say to our listeners that are out there, maybe if anything was spoken today that you found sensitive, or you need to talk to anybody about it, as a church, we're going to be available to you. We'll also have links to everything that we talked about through First Coast Women's Center if you want to contact them about it, any of the information that was spoken about today as well. And this is kind of an unusual way. We haven't done this in a podcast before, but I feel like we should just take a moment and just pray for you guys, pray for the center, and just lift that up before the Lord. So if that's okay, would you guys join me in prayer, and we'll just commit you guys to the Lord. And so, God, I just thank you today. God, we don't take it for granted, the volunteers, and for those who, Lord, put their hand to the plow and don't look back when it comes to building your kingdom. And so, God, I just want to join with all those who are listening in today to lift up First Coast Women's Center here in Northeast Florida, Lord, that you would bless them, Lord, that you would provide the resources that they need. We pray for our community, for families that are affected by abortion, or maybe who are thinking about it, that, God, you would intervene, Lord, and you would move. And we just pray for life, Lord, for life to the full, to be the testimony of our community. And so we got to lift up every thing that's been talked about today, and we commit it into your hands. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 5 of Beyond Sunday podcast. We hope that you learned something today and that you were encouraged and blessed. Be sure to tune in next time on the first Friday of next month as we dive in to more episodes of Beyond Sunday podcast.